Meggan Watterson, you are mostly welcome to Livsenergi and our podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You know, Meggan, I am so honored actually to have you here because I know it's not easy for you to squeeze in an interview right now, being all busy with, is it the next book?
Yes, the next book.
So we are here today to launch a book together in Swedish, Maria Magdalene Revealed. How do you feel about that?
I'm elated. I'm very excited to hear it's going to be translated into Swedish. So I love Sweden. I hope to get there someday.
Have you been here, or you have close relationship to Swedish people, or?
We had, growing up, we had a foreign exchange student from Sweden who I grew really close to. And my different members of my family have gone to visit him over the years. So, but I haven't yet. So I'd love to go to Sweden at some point.
Where in Sweden was he from? Do you remember?
Stockholm. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe he's around somewhere. You know, I'm in Stockholm as well. What a thing. Yeah, it was fantastic to hear you in the email saying that I just have to do this. So we're super happy. And you know, when preparing our meeting today, I kind of wrote a little celebration because I was so moved when I found your book. Can I read it for you?
Sure. Yes. Thank you.
So I caught this book a few years after its first release, and I'm glad I did. Looking at your TEDx talk from 2012, electricity ran through my body, and I was deeply touched and somewhat changed. That fire within you is also evident in the book we are about to set free. Your devotion is palpable, and all those words are true to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
So we are super curious to hear more about who you are. Who is Maria Magdalene, and why is she so special to you? Can you give us Meggan's story?
I think most importantly, when I tell my story of how I found Mary's gospel, I always start with the moments I remember of listening to my body, of listening to something that came from within me. And that really started for me in church. I was raised by a feminist. I wasn't raised in a religious household. My mom was and is incredibly liberal and feminist and had a lot of issues with the church and the silencing of women that often goes on within the church, and just the inequity that's involved in so much of religion. And so she didn't really know what to do with me because I was naturally curious about everything. The biggest questions: why are we here? You know, what's going on? Where did we go? Where are we going to go? I mean, to me, it was always the elephant in the room at the dining room table. It's like what's our purpose? You know, what's really going on here? Mm-hmm. And my other family members weren't really, interested in those conversations. So she sent me to the most liberal church that we had near us, which was a Unitarian church, very liberal form of Christianity. But even within that very liberal form of Christianity, we're still working with the New Testament, the Christian Bible, and which is the same Bible that would be taught in a very Orthodox or, even a Catholic setting. So it's the same liturgy. And with little girl clarity, that sort of fierce girl knowing, I don't know how else to describe it, little kid knowing. It's just that innocence, that piercing innocence when you feel something where there's a dissonance, there's something that just does not ring true. And when I went into even this very liberal setting and I began to read the New Testament, I was incredibly disturbed, and I couldn't articulate, I couldn't name or pinpoint or understand why exactly, but I listened to what was happening within me. I was disturbed. I was angry. I felt unsafe. All of these very real emotions. I didn't understand why, but I was. And I was so upset that I eventually broke out into hives as we were reading the New Testament. And I ended up having to leave the discussion. We were talking about Sarah and Hagar and, the treatment of women, the lack of women's voices, which again is because that's how I entered that room. I entered that room already with the lens that shouldn't we all be able to have a voice, no matter who we are? That's the feminist perspective. It isn't just about women, it's equality for any human being. That's the form of feminism I was raised in. So I came in with that, maybe that expectation that if this is God, if this is what's holiest, what's most ultimate, wouldn't that most holy voice speak on behalf of us all and see us all created equal? And that just wasn't the case. So that discord, that dissonance really set me on fire. And
How old were you at this time?
I was preteen. I was probably 11.
Yeah.
And so I walked out of church. I never returned. And that rage, that anger, that fear, all of those emotions really were question marks. They scarred me in a way. They made such an impression on me that I had to live into answering, what was I aware of that I didn't actually know? What was I sensing? What was I encountering on levels that I couldn't even articulate? I had to live into those answers. And I only began to find those answers once I started studying feminist theology, which is really just applying that lens, that this radical idea that we might all be created equal, or that whatever is ultimate might perceive each and every, not just human being, but living creation as having worth and value and rights. So it's applying that belief to ancient texts and trying to understand where are systems of power speaking versus where are the voices of the divine within these texts.
Yeah.
And really looking for that distinction, that clarity. Where is it a power that's working to use the voice of God on its own agenda? And where are there really threads of truth that might apply on a deeper, more universal scale?
What do you think? I mean, why do you think it has been like this? Why do you think, you could sense that dissonance already as a kid, but it's been there all along. Why do you think?
Well, what I found in seminary and divinity school was that there was a form of Christianity that existed before the New Testament was created. Now, a lot of people don't necessarily know about the formation of the New Testament. It's, presented as the Word of God, and it's really understood, or sort of it's taught as if it just plopped down, it arrived from God, and there it was, when really the formation of the New Testament was created during a series of councils by church fathers under Emperor Constantine, and that didn't begin until the 4th century. So before the 4th century, there was a form of Christianity. So we're talking about hundreds of years before, there was a form of Christianity that was so radical that to call yourself Christian before that point would mean being put to death. And the reason for that is because this form of Christianity believed that every creature, every modeled form, every being existed in and with each other. And that's, I'm taking lightly from a quote at the beginning of Mary's gospel. There was a belief that each and every being, not just human beings, but all beings, all living creatures, the earth itself, the plants, they all were existed in and with each other. So there was this radical idea that rather than the emperor, Caesar, being at the tippy top, and then men and landowners and educated, men, and then women, and then, rather than existing on this hierarchy of being, that so the beings down here were literally worth less. They did not have as much value. They were disposable. They were, they didn't have rights. Whereas emperor was God, Caesar was God. There was no one with more power. And this band, let's call it the Christ movement versus Christianity, because Christianity really didn't form until Emperor Constantine. It didn't form formally because they were all being persecuted. Right before it became the emperor's religion, you could be literally crucified. You would be killed to be Christian. But what this Christ movement believed was that we all actually have worth. We all actually have value. And so that really arbitrary idea of that any of us could be worth more than the other, that any one of us could, no matter what the, arbitrary, whether it's our sex or gender, whether it's our status as a slave, no matter what, these people believed that we all intrinsically had worth, and that there was something greater than Caesar. And this is the most radical part, that aspect that was more greater than Caesar existed within every one of us. And that's what decentralized the power, is that kingdom of God wasn't up there far away beyond us. The kingdom of God for these people was within every single one of us. So that is an absolutely radical concept of what it means to be human and how to reach the divine, or what might be the divine, because it also exists within us.
And isn't it where we are heading today? Hopefully.
Well, yes, I very much hope. And I love the trajectory. I love the timeline of Christianity, because so often people lament, when they come across Mary's gospel, and when they begin to really see what this original sort of Christ movement was trying to practice and realize, there's this sense of lamenting. Oh, I wish we could have gotten it right from the start. I wish this whole process of making Christianity more like the power structures that already existed within the Roman Empire, which is what happened from the 4th century onward. I wish that had never happened. And what's so powerful is that in many ways, we've never actually tried Christianity. And in many ways, Christianity has been in potential for thousands of years now. In many ways, we've tried a form of Christianity, and finding these gospels now, the gospels that were excluded from the formation of the New Testament, finding them now in the late 18th century and 19th century is, to me, it's thrilling. We're only just beginning to really understand how radical this concept of the Christ movement was trying to put into place. I mean, we're only just now beginning to grasp it. So it's really an ongoing, evolving practice. It's not set in stone. It's not what was and what was failed, but it's still in potential, which is what I find exciting.
Was that the first formation of Christianity? Was that a small movement, or I wonder how it could be crushed?
Well, it was small. They were mostly people who held the least amount of power. So women and slaves and workers, laborers, and they gathered together, and they had these what scholars refer to as supper clubs. They had these supper clubs where they would take care of each other. They would love one another, because within this structure of the Roman Empire, they had the least rights, they had the least power, they had least access to what would create an easy life or a fulfilling life. And so they took care of each other. And that movement, that the supper clubs and the Christ movement, they would talk about these teachings of Christ, where what is most ultimate is actually within us. No one can keep us. No one can say you don't have access to this. Yeah. You aren't wealthy enough. You're a female, so you can't enter this kingdom. You can't, because you are a foreigner, there was no restriction to joining this group, because what was most ultimate existed within them, and anyone and everyone had access to that. So there was so much value, so much belonging, and so much support, so much community in these groups that they were lacking in the world around them.
Yeah. Well, it's a shame it couldn't continue and spread and be big already at that time. But then again, history repeats itself.
Yeah, we weren't, we weren't ready for it is how I would describe it. That challenge would have meant that all of the men in power that had ultimate power and resources and access to all of those resources and power would have to give up some of that power. And to this day, that is something that is considered incredibly threatening.
Yeah, of course. We can just see what it would mean in our society today, right?
Yes.
So we heard a bit of where your devotion started when you were just preteen. So can you describe this as a kind of a calling that you're on this journey for more than 20 years? You've been researching and studying feminist theology.
Yes.
In Harvard, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know you could be a specialist in feminist theology. It's kind of cool.
Yes, I think that those stories are gratefully today very accepted and needed and sought after. The voices that were silenced and that were deemed, the theological term is apocrypha, which means of doubtful origin. All of the scripture that wasn't included in the formation of the Bible in the 4th century was all of the scripture that validated and set a precedence for women's spiritual equality in that first Christ movement. They understood themselves to be equal, including women. And so there were many voices, many stories of these courageous women who stood to show us, to teach us, how does a person regain their sense of agency, regain their own personal autonomy and sense of being able to choose a life for their own in a world that does not afford them any power. Mm-hmm. So this, for example, the next book that I'm writing is about a woman named Thecla, and she was a part of the earliest, form of religion, of Christianity, this Christ movement. And I write about her actually in Maria Magdalene Revealed as well. There's a segment about her. That scripture that tells her story, the Acts of Paul and Thecla, was not included in the formation of the New Testament in the 4th century under Constantine. And the reason for this, of course, is because Thecla goes through this transformation within her story of being really, in a way, sentenced to a life where she has to marry the man that her family picked out for her, has to become a dutiful wife and mother. It's all expected of her because she's a female in the 1st century. But what she connects to, what the transformation that she goes through allows her to actually listen to something that's higher than all of those expectations being projected onto her. Mm-hmm. It's a voice of her own soul telling her that she's meant for another life. And she's able to reclaim that life, even in a world that would quite literally sentence her to death for not following the expectations of those around her. She defies her mother, defies her father, her fiance. She cuts her hair short. She wears the clothes that's most often worn by men. And she becomes a follower of Christ. And she ends up baptizing herself. So that power to not listen to any voice outside of you more than the voice that you're hearing within your own heart, that is very, very dangerous. That's a very, very dangerous story for anyone to have access to, because then you are your own ultimate authority.
Yeah, and that's true. Still courageous, though.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very courageous.
But I feel that you have a lot of that in you as well.
I am fortunate because one of the lost threads in all of this, which to me is one of the most critical, is the connection to the body, rather than seeing the body as this obstacle or as this, something we should be ashamed of, something we should try to deny and, ignore. The practice from the earliest, what we know of this earliest Christ movement, was really a practice of listening very intently within. And that practice, it's formally referred to as kenosis, and that's defined as self-emptying love. For me, that's it doesn't resonate as something I can entirely understand. Self-emptying love, like what is that? What could that? The practice is really the most ancient form of meditation within the Christian tradition. And it was carried on within the ordained. So monastics would know about this practice of self-emptying love. It's a Christian contemplative practice of emptying out the ego, right? Like being able to go in and say, that isn't some ultimate truth, what I'm hearing right now, or what I'm stressing about, what I'm panicking over. that is just my ego holding a very loud, microphone. That's not real. That's not truth. And what this practice allows you to do is to clear away, to silence that voice of the ego and get down to what the soul might have to tell you, to really hear what is humming inside the heart. And I've been very fortunate to crave that. I crave that the way some people crave food, or talk about other forms of passion in this world. I crave that dialogue with what is most true inside of me, that voice. I crave it. I long for it. It was something that, even when I went to the ultimate sort of academic institutions that I could to validate that aspect of this research, I also wanted to go to the heights and the depths of the spiritual practices, the metaphysical places that I feel a lot of these truths and these teachings are coming from. Mm-hmm. And that practice, I was able to study at school, but then also put into my own daily life. And I refer to it as a soul voice meditation, because for me, that's what the experience of it is. And it just makes more sense than self-emptying love. But it really is an encounter for me of listening to what's most true. And I've been very fortunate because that's what's carried me through. That's what's always allowed me to stay on the course and to never give up, is that practice of humbling the ego and getting very still and quiet and listening to what might be true within.
You share a lot of this on your website and on Instagram as well. And it's I share it too, because a lot of it is very, it speaks directly to the heart of others as well. Mm-hmm. So keep on craving. Can you give any more concrete experiences or perhaps milestones in your life that has marked you in special ways?
I traveled down to the south of France before I wrote Maria Magdalene Revealed, again, because I crave that balance between the academic and the experiential. And I value that encounter with areas that revere Mary Magdalene in ways that I'm not able to necessarily encounter here in the States. And so I traveled to a small town called St. Maximin, and they have what they believe is Mary Magdalene's skull. And so I went down into her crypt and meditated there for a while. It's cold, and it's just so that feeling of what's so much more ancient than anything I can encounter here in the States, because it just existed long before anything here did. I can feel that. And sitting before her skull, it's encased in this gold frame with these 4 angels holding up the skull. Angels have always been a part of her story, mm-hmm. which I find fascinating, because within her gospel, there's fragments that are missing. So we sort of have to make educated guesses about what happens in the gaps of the missing pages in Mary's gospel. But she refers to these 7 powers of the ego, and she relates that Christ is teaching her how to overcome these powers of the ego in order to listen to evidently what might be truer, or what might be the soul within her. Christ refers to the word he uses in our gospel is mind, but from the Greek, it's nous, and that word new means the spiritual eye of the heart. So that word absolutely set me on fire and became a passion for me when I was in divinity school. I wrote many, many papers about nous, the new. And so when I was sitting there on my knees meditating in her cathedral, in the crypt before her skull, I just repeated one thing within me, what we could describe as the spiritual eye of the heart. I was meditating in a place deep within, and I was asking, to essentially show me the way for Mary, because the idea of writing this book, there's a lot of anger, a lot of fear, a lot of hatred around Mary Magdalene, and an idea of elevating her status from, she has been for thousands of years known as the penitent prostitute. And any ideas or suggestions that she might be something other than that really conjures up a lot of rage and anger and fear that can be directed towards the person who's suggesting it. So I was really feeling the weight of what I was going to write and what I was going to suggest, meaning that Mary Magdalene was not the prostitute. Mary Magdalene was really a companion of Christ, a spiritual companion and partner to Christ, and that she held a position of spiritual authority in whatever this earliest form of Christianity was. She was known and held in a position of extraordinary power. And so to suggest that, I knew I was going to meet with a lot of resistance. And so I was really feeling that before writing the book. And so I was there in humility, wanting to know how to do this, wanting to know how best to do this. And what I heard from that place that I would refer to as the spiritual eye of the heart, because I don't want this to sound too otherworldly or too strange. I mean, it may sound very strange to a lot of people to hear a voice inside of us, but I think it actually happens all the time. I think it happens every day. I think we just assume that the answer or this otherworldly voice is sort of going to come from outside of us, or is going to arrive in this form of an actual angel with a trumpet, and wings. And when I think we're missing out on a lot of messages because it arrives in a much more ordinary, everyday, mundane way. It just arrives quietly, unassumingly inside the heart, when we can get quiet and still and humble enough to understand that we just need to be present enough to hear it. So I was in that space, and I heard, to walk with me is to walk as me. And at first, I didn't understand it. And I just sort of repeated it inside of me until I did. And what I began to understand was that even with all my research, even with everything that I had done up to that point, years and years of meditation, I was still projecting this power onto her, this power that was actually my own. I was still elevating her into something that was other than human, other than, something really that was beyond me. And that was keeping me from really understanding the whole point of that movement, of their practice. The whole point really is for us to reclaim that power that we project onto anyone and everyone outside of us. The power that saves us, really. I mean, the power to really listen to who we are and to what we need to do and to what's true for us uniquely. So that was a defining moment for me to hear that, and then to again find the courage to put that into practice and to really understand that this whole pilgrimage, this whole calling about Mary Magdalene really is asking me to reclaim my own power in a way where formal religion really asks us to give it away, and to say that what's ultimate is outside of us. And this aspect of Christianity that was ultimately written out of history and then lied about for thousands of years and buried in the Egyptian deserts, that this is a calling to reclaim that power that exists within every one of us equally. And that power is love, is what's ultimate. And we can call that God, or we can call that the truth or the soul. Mary's gospel refers to it as simply the good, capital G, the good.
Yeah, the good.
So, the good.
I like that you write God with, how do you say small, like not
Lowercase?
capital?
Yeah. Lowercase.
Yeah, and good with capital G. So about spirituality and religion, where would you put yourself in between the two? Or, because you have devoted your life studying and researching theology and religion, or religions, I don't know. And still you feel like a very spiritual person.
I don't see myself as religious. Again, I think that there's a perception that I would be religious, given my devotion to such a religious figure and figures. But for me, it is about that encounter of love, and it's about that practice of putting love into action then. And for me, at least so far, religion confuses that power, and really creates environments where people don't necessarily understand their own sense of power, and they don't necessarily seek for that voice of love inside them. Most religions I've studied and encountered, there's an element of it that's disempowering, and that distances us from what might be the ultimate good, rather than includes us in that equation of what is capital G good.
Yeah.
If there was a version of this earliest Christ movement, I'd be, a she-pope. Like, I'd be all over it. I would be wearing the outfits. I would be, full on. But that, as far as today is concerned, it doesn't necessarily exist yet. So.
Well, I'm super happy that you're craving all this, because you're a very good and very important role model for this world. We talked about this before we started the recording button, but it's actually a good position to just take it one more time. So at first glance, Mary Magdalene, the book, can be seen as a religious book.
Yes.
But it's not.
No.
How would you describe it? Or what would you say about that?
I think, like so much of history, the voices and the stories, especially of women, have been either completely erased and silenced or have been rewritten. And in the case of Mary Magdalene, I wanted to set the record straight. I wanted to be able to share on a mass level what I was able to learn through 5 years of degrees, in seminary and divinity school. I wanted to share what I learned, the truth that I learned about her story, and the implications that cover story, that lie about her has profound implications, whether we're, Christian or we have nothing to do, we want nothing to do with religion. The fact is that those ideas about women, about sexuality, about the body, those Christian ideas are everywhere. They permeate culture. They radiate. Even if we never entered a church, there are aspects of what happened in the process of erasing her voice and erasing that form of Christianity that really impacted culture in a way that is bigger than religion. And I felt that as a woman who has struggled to heal sexual assault, to heal my relationship to my body, to really reclaim my voice in relation to desire and what might be healthy and right and good, and to heal that relationship, which I think is one of the most important relationships for us to heal, not just as women, but as human beings, that we can trust the body, that the body never lies. And, that idea, again, that the body is sinful, those roots can really be found in Mary's story and the way that over the course of hundreds of years from when her gospel was first eradicated from the New Testament and ordered to be destroyed. There was an edict that went out to destroy her gospel. Then over the course of the next 100 years, Christ became less and less human. His humanity was downplayed, and Mary's humanity was increased to the point that she was all body, she was all sin, she was all lust, she was the prostitute. So there was an inverse storytelling that happened for the two of them. And, that served the purpose then of relegating women to what's outside of what's holy, but to relegating them to outside of any position of spiritual authority, because we're sinful, we have to do with sex and sexuality, which is, again, if we try to check that, it takes two people to have sex, it really, there's no part of it that makes sense, but it's so deeply ingrained into the fabric of what became a more pervasive story of what it is to be human. And when I really began to excavate her story, I began to understand that even though I've never been baptized, I've never been a card-carrying Christian, a lot of those beliefs are ones that had taken root in me, that I couldn't trust my body, that that there is something slightly wonky about sex and sexuality, and so that process, that again, it's reclaiming a power of really being able to be at home within your own skin, within your own body. That is such an incredible journey, and such an important one that pervades our sex or sexuality. It pervades, it's really one of the most important journeys is to be able to trust being here, being in this human body.
But when hearing you talking about this, you get I get kind of upset and a bit sad and a bit angry about how such a thing, somebody consciously wanted to destroy the view of women.
To me, it's, when I first encountered Mary's gospel, right, even by the end of her gospel, within her gospel, there's doubt, right? Her version of the story is already held into question. Peter, the apostle Peter, questions whether or not she's telling the truth, right? So to me, that was so incredibly familiar. That didn't feel first century, that felt 21st century. Not being able to believe a woman's voice. But when we look at this from a psychological, like a larger perspective, it really, really asks us to look at the way that whether we're male or female, trans, regardless of how we understand our being, there is a deep and ancient wound with the feminine, with trusting, whether we're male or female, no matter how we see ourselves, trusting the feminine. And so on a larger scale, like if we take an eagle's view for a moment of this and see Mary as representing the feminine, and what I mean when I say that, because it sounds very essentialist, but what I'm saying is something that exists within all of us, not just women, all of us. It's this trusting what we hear inside of us as human beings. Mary is questioned and doubted by the masculine in the story. Yeah. This is what happens to every single one of us all the time. We're constantly doubting what the heart has to tell us. Mm-hmm. We're constantly saying, how could it be that simple? How could I just get quiet, go within, and know what the answer is? How could I ever be that powerful? Like, how could I ever have such access to what's true? So there's this need to doubt. There's this need to doubt what is most vulnerable and soft and fragile and also loving inside of us. We constantly want to doubt that. And that's what I see being played out in Mary's gospel, and perpetually, constantly, all the time, not just in the external world, but also within us. Yeah, constantly doubt what we already know is true. And we constantly silence that voice that is just quietly telling us, you know who you are, you know what you want, and you know what you need to do. And
are you better at listening to your voice today?
Yes. Do I still go through a wrestling match? Yes, absolutely. I still reach surrender via exhaustion. That still is a practice, I still go through that dance of pretending like I don't already know the answer, and researching and trying to and asking other people, and but I think that's needed. I think that that's part of what it is to be human. And then we arrive at the answer when we're actually ready to take action on it, if that makes sense. So it sort of sits there until we are strong enough or willing enough to be able to take actions on what we know is true for us. And yes, it is. I'm more adept at going inward than I was in the past, and I trust the process more. So I've been through the dance enough to know that if I don't listen, I know what that road looks like when I don't listen. And but the beauty of it is that over time, there's less and less, shame and judgment and the weight of like, why didn't you do this, or why, it's more just acceptance, just more and more acceptance, more compassion, more of like a loving gaze when I sort of have to take a while before really acting on what I know is true. So I think that grows over time.
Just being aware of that the dance exists is a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Are you in a dance right now?
No, fortunately, the writing process demands that I go inward in a way that actually makes interviews difficult, which is why I've been saying no to interviews, just a yes for you. I have a quote above where I write from Rilke that says, "The only journey is the journey within." And when I write, it's a spiritual practice, really, of every day devoting, several hours of just going inward. And so I tend to have less of that dance of listening and more of struggling to get everyday things done, like grocery shopping and staying on top of the bills, like all the practical things that you need an ego for sort of begin to suffer. And when I'm writing, it's, I can understand why monasteries and caves, why mystics have those in their stories, because it really helps to sort of shut out the rest of the outside world and the practicalities of the outside world. Yeah. It's so nice to be able to go within and then just remain there.
Yes. But you have a son. Is he a teenager now or close to?
He just officially became a teenager. He turned 13 recently. So yes.
And a single mom, so you can't just leave,
No. And I think that is as it's meant to be, because I think we need to bring what we understand to be incredibly spiritual and otherworldly into those places that are incredibly mundane. Yeah. So I like that immersion, that practice of bringing that light to where it hasn't been before.
Yeah. In the book, you dedicate the book to your son, Shane. Shane.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful dedication. You have a special bond, right?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. Beautiful. So I know that I'm dragging over time here, Meggan. So we're just about to finish off. Can you tell us a little bit? What do you want your readers to take away from reading the book?
So for me, the absolute most important aspect of the book is reclaiming that relationship to the voice of truth within. Whether anyone ever understands or wants to get into the details of the history of Christianity, Mary Magdalene's story, for me, the red thread that runs throughout the book, runs throughout her history and her story, is this practice, very simple practice that allows us to really move in the world, in our lives, in a more connected, and empowered place. So for me, that's the most important aspect of the book, is learning to trust again that this very quiet, unassuming voice inside of you will show you the way, will show you the life that is really meant for you, and will allow you to confront those voices around you that are asking you to live your life according to their needs, right? Versus living a life of your heart's desire, living a life you won't regret. You'll look back on and you'll know it was truly your own. It was the one of your own choosing. That's most critical to me, because I really think that starts a movement. It really starts a sort of universal practice, whether anyone is Christian or really wants anything to do with Christianity. It's about following that voice of love inside them. That to me is the most important.
Maybe this is a weird question, I don't know. You tell me. If you were to give the same book a new title, what would you name it?
Well, I wanted to name it Maria Magdalene Was Not a Prostitute. That's what I wanted to call it. Just bam, just headline, right? So even if no one had an interest in picking it up, because, a lot of people associate Maria Magdalene with Catholicism, and with religion innately. And so I just wanted to get that message out there, so that if no one ever picks up the book, at least they know
this.
She actually wasn't a prostitute. So, because that's what she was famous, that's what she's known for. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to call it Maria Magdalene Was Not a Prostitute. And I think it has the right title. My editor wanted to call it Maria Magdalene Revealed, really to link it back to my first book, which is called Reveal. And that book brought out the stories from all the world religions, lost stories of the voices of women and holy saints and gurus and female Buddhas, these lost voices of the feminine that are a part of the divine equation. And so for me, it had this sense of continuation of my work that I ended up loving. So I agreed. I let go of my sort of, shocking title. It's the Scorpio in me, I think. I just want to.
Are you Scorpio as well?
All the way through. I'm all Scorpio.
This is, I have to tell you, I have interviewed 3 authors this week. You are my third one. All 3 powerful, very strong, capable women, and all 3 are Scorpios. And I'm married to one. In the beginning of this week, I prepared myself because I knew that this week is important. I'm going to meet so many important people. Cool.
Scorpio. Yeah, I wouldn't mind having a little bit of Earth or a little bit of something else in me, but it's just all Scorpio. So
I'm Taurus.
So that's why we can get along, because you would ground me out of it.
What about what date are you born?
13, which is, that's Mary's number. She's associated with the number 13.
Yeah, we have 13 on Friday. Friday the 13th.
Yeah. Which has to do with the feminine and the phases of the moon. And it's always been feared as unlucky, but actually it's very powerful. So
that will change my mind about Friday the 13th.
Yes, no need to fear it.
So do you have, maybe we've already talked about this without knowing, but do you have a motto in life?
I have oracle that's coming out that's just focused on Mary Magdalene. It's coming out this summer in July to honor her feast day, which is in July. And there's when you open up the oracle, there's a saying that's going to be on the inside of the oracle, and it's "Love has already won." And that's absolutely my life's motto. Love has already won. So.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's wonderful. Love has already won. I never heard it. Good, yes. Good. So where are you from? Where are you born?
I was born in the Midwest originally, in Champaign, Illinois, and I grew up in Ohio. So Midwestern girl. But then I did all of my schooling in Boston, East Coast, and then spent some time on the West Coast, which I loved, in California. Felt very at home there. And now I have settled, I think for good, in Florida, which I absolutely love because of the ocean. Just taking long walks by the sea, and the warmth is just, for me, so phenomenal and healing. So I absolutely love living here. I don't see living. I don't see leaving. I see, traveling and visiting colder places, but only for short little periods of time. I think I'm done with winter. So.
Oh, I like Florida too. We are in Sarasota once in a while.
Oh, beautiful. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's nearby.
Yeah. So you said you had brothers, right? Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have a brother who's an environmentalist, very powerful younger brother, Andrew. And I have an older sister who's a lecturer in the UK at a university. And I have a little sister who's here in Florida with me, and she works for Amazon. And I love having her near me. And she has a little niece, a little 2-year-old. Oh. I mean, I have a niece because she has a little daughter, a 2-year-old. So that's heaven for me. And so she has a cousin nearby, which is just so amazing. So I love that.
It's wonderful with family, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So when it sounds like you're quite interested in zodiac signs and astrology, is that true?
Well, I wasn't originally, because when people heard that I was a Scorpio, I found it so fascinating the way that there were all of these assumptions then sort of made about me. And whenever I had my chart read, the astrologer would completely freak out, because I'm just all Scorpio. Like it's like a raging Scorpio. And so I was always fascinated by those reactions. And then recently, when I was in the UK, I had the head of publishing, my publishing house in the UK. I bought this gold ring when I was after a speaking engagement. It's this huge eagle. And she said, the ascended sign of the Scorpio is the eagle. And I always resonated with the eagle. And so I thought that was so curious that she said that, because I had never resonated with, how the Scorpio like stings somebody. It just wasn't a part of my personality to like attack where someone's the most vulnerable, or, whatever those traits are of the Scorpio. A lot of it didn't resonate with me. And then she said, and when she said it, how something's true. Like I just felt it in my body. I just got the chills, and I just knew that that was why I had reached for this giant eagle. Was because that really resonated with me in terms of my sign, being a Scorpio.
Because it's funny that you're mentioning the how do you say the toxic?
Yeah.
The stick. Because that's also what I think about when thinking about Scorpio. And since I'm married to one, it could be kind of scary. So when is he gonna kill me. But he doesn't have anything of that in him as well. But still, I don't know how to interpret it, really. I haven't gone into it much. So things you love to do in your everyday life when not researching or writing or being with Shane.
I was going to say that first. So meditating, that's very necessary, I think, for everything else in life, for everything in life. That's that journey within. Walking on the beach, that's my absolute favorite. I really turn into this ageless little being, and I am instantly curious about anything that I find, the shells, like strange things that wash up. I get little girl excited to get to the beach, because every time you go, it's different. I mean, it looks physically different, but then you also never know what you're going to find and encounter. So I have all of these little, treasures that I've found on my walks by the sea. And to me, it just feeds me in so many ways to do that. Not just as a writer, but just as a human being, to be able to walk by the ocean. To me, I'm so incredibly grateful for.
It is beautiful. I'm also hooked by the sea. So do you have a special meditation that you practice regularly?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, that ancient form of meditation, of contemplative prayer, which was referred to as kenosis, or self-emptying love, that this earliest band of Christians practiced. When I was in divinity school, I studied a version of it that transformed into a practice that the hesychists performed. It was the prayer of the heart, and these hesychists practiced in the desert. So they removed themselves from the rest of, normal humankind, and they would curl over their hearts, and they would focus all of their consciousness into their heart. And this practice of going inward to the heart really, really fascinated me. And so I started practicing that, with knowing of kenosis, and then understanding that self-emptying love becomes possible when you bring all of your consciousness into your heart. So you know what's in it, what's sort of playing around inside of you. And then you use that consciousness to become aware of a presence. For me, it's love. For me, it's the soul. And you just encounter it. And for me, what I began to develop is what I refer to as the soul voice meditation, because for me, I would sometimes just sit in that presence, and just that experience alone was healing, just sitting in the presence of that love within me. Other times I would have very pressing questions, something that I was struggling with, and I desperately wanted the answer to, and had already, sought that answer outside of me without, finding it. And so I began to try to find those answers within me in this soul voice meditation. And over the years, it just grew and developed, and I began to teach it. And, I got to, I think, even more than my own journey, my own experience with it, seeing other people encounter love as something that's within them, versus thinking that love is something that can only arrive from outside of them, from someone else. It's such an incredible revolution. It's such an incredible moment for me to get to witness that, when someone arrives at their own love, and they realize that they're not dependent on these sometimes very precarious sources of love, sometimes very troubled and mixed sources of love. They're not dependent on their source of love from someone else outside of them. That can be extra, that can be in addition to, but to return to that place within them, that ultimate source, that to me, and that's the ultimate goal of the soul voice meditation, is to be able to, in, at first small intervals or little sips, just to begin to encounter love from within. That to me is just, it's the most phenomenal revolution to encounter that.
And we're happy that this meditation is in the book.
Yes, it's in Maria Magdalene Revealed.
Yeah. Meggan, I am so humble and so grateful for all your time here today. Thank you so much.
Oh my, thank you so much for reaching out to me and for translating this work of this labor of love of mine into Swedish. It means so much to me, and I'm incredibly grateful. So thank you.
I'm so happy for that. And I did find a very good and very reliable translator, and she's made an amazing job.
Wonderful.
I was looking through it today because we're just about putting it to print in a week or two. And I was just going through it today, and I can't wait to just hold it in my hand and read it. And I've been all through this process, I've been telling my colleague who sits opposite of me so many times, I can't wait to just read it from A to Z, in Swedish. So yeah, I'll let you know when I've done it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I want to wish you a lovely end of the day, and let's keep in touch.
Thank you. Yes, I love that.
Bye-bye.